Oh, thank you, everybody. So nice of you. Thank you. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. In 2016, 63,632 people died from a drug overdose, making it the leading cause of accidental deaths in the United States. To give that some kind of context, that is an outrageous rise in the numbers, and we are in the midst of a wildly underfunded, grossly misrepresented, and under-discussed epidemic. Beautiful Boy, the new film starring our next guest, tells the true story of a father and son's journey through the son's addiction to intravenous drug use. It's a harrowing, beautiful film directed by Felix Van Groeningen and starring Steve Carell as the father and Timothée Chalamet as the son struggling with addiction. Let's take a look.
So how you doing?
I'm doing great, just doing what needs to be done.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry, Dad.
Why don't we just have lunch and talk? We can do that, right? Please. You think that you have this under control.
I understand why I do things. It doesn't make me any different. You're just embarrassed because I was like this amazing thing, like your special creation or something, and you don't like who I am now.
Yeah? Who are you, Nick?
This is me, Dad. Here, this is who I am.
This is not you. This is not you, Nick.
What are you doing, huh? You always gotta be controlling everything all the time.
Let me book your room
No, Dad.
at a hotel for a couple of nights.
Dad. I don't want it to go like this.
My son has gone missing. Nicholas Sheff, S-H-E-F-F.
There's no one by that name, sir.
There are moments that I look at him, this kid that I raised, who I thought I knew inside and out, and I wonder who he is. I thought we were close. I thought we were closer than most fathers and sons. Why?
I felt better than I ever had, so I just kept on doing it.
This isn't us. This is not who we are. My son is out there somewhere, and I don't know what he's doing. I don't know how to help him.
You can't!
I don't feel like I have a disease. This isn't like cancer. This is my choice. I put myself here.
I failed.
I can't do it alone.
I need to find a way to fill this black hole in me. I still have a family. I want them to be proud of me.
What you have, you're gonna find it again. You're gonna get it back. Do you know how much I love you? I love you more than everything.
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 From Beautiful Boy, please welcome director Felix Van Groeningen, Steve Carell, and Timothée Chalamet. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. Congratulations on this really beautiful film. Felix, I want to say what struck me so much about this movie is I feel like we have seen drug movies in the past, but they're always told with a certain amount of bleakness, and they're always quite drab, and this is a very colorful, beautiful film photographically, and the way that you create these very fluid sequences with the music, and the music itself is also kind of celebratory, beautiful music. Even in the darkest parts of the film, it's really gorgeous music that you're sort of using to soundtrack the film. Can you talk about that idea behind it and sort of going against the grain when it comes to movies about addiction?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's based on two books, two memoirs written by the father and the son, so it's a true story, and I think that's what's unique about it. It is combining those 2 points of view, and when I read the books, I really felt that I felt an immediate connection to the characters, to the whole family. I felt so much love, and that's really why I wanted to do this. They go through difficult times, but there's always so much love. And the music was inspired by the real people. In the books, they reference a lot of music. David's a journalist. He interviewed a lot of musicians. For Nick, music was really, really important as he was growing up, as for a lot of young people, I guess. And he had a very eclectic taste, and it inspired us to do that in the movie too, and to just use existing songs and to start to use them as score.
Now, the two of you are playing real people, as was just mentioned, Nic and David Sheff. How much research did you wanted to do into them and how they acted and what their time was like at this period in their lives?
The research really wasn't predicated on mimicking them. We both met our real life counterparts and didn't want it. I probably speak for both of us on this, that we didn't want it to seem like a science experiment, that they were, being observed in any way. And so much of the research it was in the books themselves, and they really laid their souls bare. And so there were literally 2 volumes that we could glean, their stories from. But what I picked up from knowing David was the fact that he is a very open, honest, caring, loving dad, a really intelligent guy, and courageous too. Courageous to have written the book, courageous to have traveled this journey, and then to essentially turn it over to strangers and hope that it translated in an honest way.
And what was your sense going into portraying Nic, who is obviously, he's been sober for 8 years, but I think going through a process like this could be triggering in some way. Thankfully, it seems like it hasn't been right now. But what were your fears? What were your concerns going into portraying someone that's still alive that is in a somewhat sensitive place?
Well, just doing it justice. And I know Steve's played people in real life before. I've played characters in books that are fiction but not nonfiction, so it adds a layer of, like you said, there's an anxiety. You just want to get it right. But I think Steve and I had I think the greatest gift we got, and we've discussed this, was kind of a license to go and an understanding that this wasn't going to be, as Steve said, a science experiment of their mannerisms or how they eat soup, is how you put it this morning, but rather, the most honest version of a story that, before we got out here, like you said, is affecting so many people, and there's a trepidation to talk about it. And we were talking about this before. You said you've known people that have been affected by this. I'm sure a lot of people in here know people or themselves have been affected by this, so I felt like there was justice to that, and the anxiety was to get it right.
You're oftentimes with movies about addiction, there is a clear reason given for why the person suffering from addiction is suffering or how they got to that point. And what I appreciated about this movie is that there's a number of factors that are kind of swirling around this young man, but none of them are a clear reason, because there's nothing that you can really blame when someone falls into this kind of spiral. For you as the actor going into this, were you looking for things that you could pinpoint, or?
No, I think that's I really like how you phrased that, because if I was looking for some sort of key or a clue from the outside, I think the lens into it was ultimately like, oh wait, I'm not playing. I'm not going to play a conception of a drug addict. I'm going to play a human who is addicted to drugs, and the idea that addiction doesn't have a recognizable face, and that's a stereotype, I think, comforts those that haven't been affected by it, where you go, okay, well, this couldn't happen to my family or my friends because we don't look like this or whatever. And when the reality of it is that almost everyone knows someone that's been affected by it. So I felt like I wanted to find the humanity of it. I wanted to find the light of it. It felt self-serving to play a drug addict, and it's also, it's really a father-son story. It's about the family and the bond between these 2 people.
I think so often when you haven't been affected by this, you only see the aftermath, you only see the addicts, and that's the face of addiction for you. And what this movie does is consistently juxtapose the face of the addict with the face of the person that was the addict prior to that, giving a sense that we all have mothers, we all have fathers, we all have lives before our life went into this place. Steve, I was complimenting you during the trailer. I loved your performance so much, and I loved the fact that you found this sort of limiting control of David Sheff, where he is still, as a father, trying to show control of the situation that he has no control of. Can you talk about that part of your performance?
Well, I'm a dad, so I try to exhibit control with my kids, lest they freak out, because I think the worst thing, and my father was the same way. He's 93 now, and he's exactly as he's always been. He's kind of a stoic guy, and really doesn't allow us to see the pain or suffering, even though we can see it. I know when my dad is feeling something, but he tries to disguise it for the sake of the family. And I think David Sheff did the same thing in a lot of ways. That he tried to be the rock. He felt like he needed to be the glue and sort of an example. And And the further down this spiral went with his son, the harder it was to maintain that composure and that sense of calmness. And I think you are sort of waiting for the character to fall. And when it happens, it's a tough thing to watch, I think.
I think it's also a part of this idea that, you know, as much as your character is going through that, his control is not the reason for why Nic is addicted to drugs. It's just another piece of the character and a piece of this family. And it's nothing that you can blame on what happened. And if you're looking close, you can see it in your performance, but Felix never touches it in a way that's like, oh, it's because of control that this is happening.
I think it's one of the stages that a person goes through. They blame themselves. There's a sense of ego especially when your kids are suffering, you tend to blame yourself. And what could I have done differently? Where did I go wrong? And it's really not about that.
Felix, what were some of the biggest challenges for you going into directing this film? And I sort of say that in the context of all of these things that are swirling around that you could blame, but you as a filmmaker are kind of smart enough to not pinpoint, although ultimately that would give a very easy, satisfying answer to an audience.
I guess that adapting a book is already difficult because you have to make big choices to narrow it down to when you make a film of it, because there's always like just too much material, so you have to narrow it down. And then in this film we had 2 books, so we really took our time to boil it down to get to the core of both their characters' arcs, and that took time. But I knew from the beginning that you know, David's story, the father's story, is a beautiful mythical journey of a father trying to save his son and understand him, and who does everything, doesn't give up until he eventually, you know, also realizes that there's another part of the family and himself that he has to think about. So that journey, you know, I was always clear, I guess, in the macro. But then, how do you construct it? What are the phases that David goes through? You know, we worked hard to meticulously craft that, and then fit in Nic's point of view, which we wanted to, you know, not sensationalize or anything. You do see him use drugs, but it you know, it's late in the movie, and we wanted to really get inside of what is eating him, what makes him relapse at some moments, and but just live it with him, so you could, you know, pinpoint it or see it happen before your eyes without really, just as the character, not really grasping why. And then fit that story into David's story, because we really had to fall in love with this character and root for him and love him, so we could understand what David was going through.
How difficult was it for you to find the structure of the film? Because what I found so fascinating was that the film is structured in sequences rather than in like a sort of classic, these scenes lead to this moment. You can really see it as a series of, for lack of a better word, sort of like music videos at times. Music videos are really the wrong description because they're substanceless, but it's really the way that you soundtrack it are these beautiful sequences that are elliptical and are telling multiple stories at once in different timelines. But by the time you get to the end, it does feel like you've watched one linear story.
You know, I like films that are broader experiences than just pure stories, and we do follow these 2 characters, and we're with them in their experience. And so as David is realizing that he is losing his kid, he is reminded of beautiful moments, so we do flashback. But he's also, you know, his journey is also questioning himself. Where did I go wrong? So we do jump around a bit to you know, get into his head. And for Timmy's character, it's the same thing. He does remember good moments, or is reminded of beautiful moments of their family as he's hopeful. And yeah, it was a journey. It was a journey to get there.
How much of it was found in the script, and how much of it was found in the post process?
You know, it's always been the idea. It was the only way to tell the story. The books are so vast and are so full of beautiful memories of this family, and I wanted to incorporate that. It was important to show that, to show their lust for life, to show their love for life, and so we always had a couple of timelines in the script as well. But we did restructure a bit in the edit to find the emotional logic of the movie, and not just to have a cerebral cut to a past when he's thinking about something, just to have an emotional flow and to make it an experience.
I love when I go see a movie and you can tell that it was a very fluid process for the team behind the movie, and it doesn't feel like it was a rigid script, a rigid shoot, and then they just edited what they had essentially scripted. And this movie really feels very fluid and alive. Timothy, what were you most worried about when it came to portraying this character? We've seen addicts before, and really when it comes to truth and storytelling, it's what's not cliche. And there's been so many cliche depictions, I think, of addiction.
Well, I think that's exactly it, and I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but I wanted to find the humanity of this guy, and I think of films like Heaven Knows What or Christian F., and they really get that raw state of using. And certainly I wanted the using sequences in this to feel accurate and right, but it's also redemptive. I think of it more as a recovery movie than an addiction movie. I mean, it's both, but Nic makes it through. David and Nic were at a screening last night. We were all together. So I wanted to, like I said, find the humanity and not, as you said, like try and like bluster my way through it or something.
Well, when you have that sequence on the college campus, without giving anything away, I know no one has really seen the movie yet. It opens tonight in New York and LA, November 9th nationwide. Check your listings. But you like that? Did you enjoy that?
That is shameless.
Shameless.
Awful.
And then, so the other scene when you're on drugs, the scene on the college campus, that beautiful sequence with that wonderful shot spinning around you. How do you?
October 12th. The movie comes out October 12th. No.
Did I mess it up?
No.
How do you find that moment for you as an actor? How do you feel like you're doing that moment justice?
That is 100% trust in Felix, and because you're playing an emotive state there, like when someone's high on heroin, like I am in that scene. There's a very specific physical effect, and you don't want to get that wrong as an actor, and. We were dialoguing frequently that day, and I won't say in which direction, but I remember saying to you, either a little bit more or a little bit less in one way, and Felix said, no, like do it as is right now, like don't worry about it, and because like you said, the biggest fear in that kind of thing would be that people in the audience are like, what is he doing?
Steve, what was your biggest fear in portraying David Sheff?
There's a scene towards the end when my character has to essentially turn his back on his son, and it goes against everything, really every fiber of a parent's being, and so I was afraid of that moment because it was a difficult thing to wrap my head around. To think, I have teenagers, and to think to have reached a point. Where it's better to let go than continue to enable, and so that was sort of a scary moment to play.
Scary to have to sort of get yourself there, or scary because it was difficult to understand?
Both. Scary because it's something that just didn't come naturally. I had to wrestle with the idea of it and sort of justify it in order to play it.
Right. Felix, how did you find the soundtrack for the film? How did you find all the songs for this movie? It's great.
Thank you.
My college soundtrack.
Great. As I said before, a lot of it was inspired by David and Nic, by their taste. They make references in their books. And so it organically found its way into the story. We see David and Nic rocking out on Nirvana. David is singing the lullaby based on the title song, Beautiful Boy, by John Lennon, for his son when he's a kid. And then the other songs came in the edit, part from some from the books and some from the editor, who is my longtime editor, who did all of my movies, and with who I have a very special bond in being shameless sometimes in trying stuff. So for months we had a Spotify session open, and we would just try stuff, and a lot of his favorite tracks are in there, and a lot of my favorite tracks are in there.
Steve, we talked about your character's control and you portraying a man who's constantly trying to control the situation, but there's also another layer that you add to it. It's so intelligent because it's never openly articulated and said out loud, but he's a blindsided guy. He's a guy who's trying to control something, but he's totally blindsided. And the scene where you're sitting down with a woman who you are essentially trying to interview about her own addiction at a diner, you just are portraying someone completely baffled, but at the same time trying to control the situation.
Yeah, there's a David Sheff is a writer and a creator, creative mind, and he worked for Rolling Stone at that point. So his first idea when faced with his son's drug addiction was to research everything he could and to find out, to try to pin it down, to try to understand it so he could essentially attempt to solve it. And the further in he got, the more he realizes that, the more he knows he doesn't know. And the scene that you talk about, David meets an addict on the street, a woman, and takes her to lunch to try to glean some information, some knowledge from her, what it's like, what it feels like, why, just to gain a little bit greater understanding. And even in that brief exchange, he realizes that he's way out of his depth and can't even begin to comprehend what his son might be going through.
But there's so much that you don't say, but say with your face, I think, in that scene. Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question?
Hello. My question is for Timothée. I know you've talked a bit about the physical transformation that you went through for this role. Is that the first time that you had to do something like that for a role, and how did it help in portraying your character?
Yeah, so under Felix's encouragement, but I think it was the right idea, I lost 18 pounds before we started to shoot, and we shot that a week of scenes, let's say, interspersed throughout the movie that are Nic at his worst state. And yeah, I felt like I felt like I wanted to do that to get the not to be crass, but like the aesthetic of it right almost, and to look like someone going through that. But I never wanted it to be like the thing that I could go like, yeah, that's why whatever. And yeah, it puts you in a certain mind state when you lose weight like that. And certainly not what somebody going through this is actually going through, obviously, but like it makes you addled and it makes you irritable and tired and upset and hungry all the time. And yeah, it helped a lot. And that was the first time I had done that. And for a movie I did this summer, I kind of did the opposite. Not totally, as you can see, but yes, that was the first time.
It was fascinating to see because as you were losing, we were also like crafting the character, right? The clothes, the costume design, all that came together, and we did makeup tests. And so by the time we did the makeup test, he was like totally in character. Like I would talk to him and tell him like, go stand there, and you would totally admit it. It was so weird to see it transform and become Nic.
That's like called a camera test. So basically you have the job at that point, but like I still hear the word test. So I'm like, let me make sure I do a good job for everyone.
Let me lose 5 more pounds for this camera
Yeah, exactly.
test.
Yeah, that morning. Yeah.
Let's get another quote right here.
Hi, this is for Steve and Timothée. What lessons did you learn from each other during the filming?
I don't know if it was a lesson, but I learned that he is everything you'd hope he'd be. He's truly, yeah, woo. He came in that first day and I met him and I thought, this is just a great guy. Obviously a fantastically talented actor, but beyond that, just smart and funny and likable, and he is dying over here. But I mean, honestly, that was my biggest takeaway just in terms of him. He's a really gracious soul and easy to love him as a son.
Oh, man, Steve.
So what did you take away?
Just trash him, Timothée. Just go right in.
Steve's got this really cool pair of shoes, and Steve's an incredible actor. I was a fan. I've said that before. So I just being opposite him, working with him, I feel like there was things consciously, unconsciously I took, but really the biggest was like his professionalism, the way he carries himself as a human, as a man. And I remember one of the first rides we had to set in one of those carrier vans. Is that right? Someone's all right?
No, sorry, go
One
ahead.
of the first rides to set in a van. We all got out the van, and Steve waited for everyone to get out, and he helped them out one by one, like people with their work bags. And then he shut the door behind all of them. And I was like, okay, all right, like I'm gonna take that from, and certainly now that is something I do. I do the Carell help down. And
That's what it's called. The Carell help down.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hi, my question is for Steve. Because you've played such unique and diverse roles in the past, what did you do differently in order to prepare for such a dramatic and serious role?
I leaned into the fact that I'm a dad and that this whole thing was terrifying for me. And the subject matter, it was a hard thing to choose to do because you feel like you're just knocking wood all the time in terms of your own kids. Because you see a family like this, it's extremely loving and seemingly functional and intelligent and kind, all of those things, and it still ripped them apart. So that was the biggest hurdle in my mind, and that's really what I relied on, was just my love for my family, my kids, and I just sort of used that.
You have 2 other movies coming out this year. In Vice, you play Donald Rumsfeld, and in Marwen Call, you play a man who suffered a traumatic brain injury and is sort of obsessed with his figurines, I believe, right? It's based on the documentary. Robert Zemeckis directed it.
Right.
Those are 2 characters that are somewhat, I would say, outside of the box in terms of what you probably have to do as a performer. With something, what do you find easier, doing something where you are kind of modulating a version of yourself, or modulating like a broad character that you have to find?
I approach it all sort of the same way. I research it and try to find whatever humanity I can within that character, whether it's somebody that might seem not so nice or
Rumsfeld.
not referring to anyone in particular, but I think you just have to kind of find whatever your core of that character is going to be, and never comment on whether you think they're a good person or a bad person, but try to find the humanity in them. But I kind of approach it all the same way, and one's really not more difficult than the other. They're just always different experiences. And when you get to work with someone of this caliber too, it makes it that much. Working with good people make you better, and that's always an exciting thing.
One more.
Well, Timothy, are you finally ready for a comedy after this?
Say it again?
Are you finally ready for a comedy after this?
Am I going to do what?
Comedy.
Comedy.
Sorry, I'm out of my mind. Okay, I couldn't hear you. I would really love to do a comedy, and I think I got a trick up my sleeve that's not a movie, and I won't say what it is, but I think that'll be like a couple months from now.
He will be playing Michael Scott in the reboot of The Office.
I mean, speaking of the Office, really briefly, you have
my world's favorite boss mug turn. Okay, sorry.
you have Amy Ryan in this, who is really one of the greatest actresses I think there is, and it's
Completely agree.
was that your suggestion to have Amy because you'd worked with her before? Or?
We talked about it, yeah. I mean, she was definitely someone Felix was already considering. So yeah, I mean, she's
the best.
She is, and she's so excellent. And again, just a great person too.
Well, guys, I love the film. It opens today in New York and LA, and then it expands November 9th for everybody to see. Check out where it's going to be. And give these guys a big round of applause and go see Beautiful Boy. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.